We continue now at the top of Daf Chavdalet Amud Beis Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 24b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a machlokas tanoim between the Chachamim and Rabbi Shimon with regards to the Kabbalas Hadam, the receiving of the blood with the left hand. According to Rabbi Shimon, if the Kohen does the Kabbalas Hadam, if he does it with the left hand, it is kosher. According to the Tanna Kama, it is possible, it is disqualified. And the Gemara now explains the machlokas. The machlokas between them is b'mikra nidrash lafonov uliacharav kamiflagi. They're arguing whether the pasuk is darshan before and after. And Rashi explains, Nidrash Rabbi Shimon Savar, Rabbi Shimon holds, Mikra Nidrash Liacharov Velo Lafanov, that the pasuk is darshaned for what follows, what comes after, but not for what comes before. Hilkach, therefore, Etzba, when it says the word Etzba in the pasuk, which again indicates that it has to be with the right finger, that has to do with the application, Avinasan Dechsiv Basreikoi, that goes on the Vinasan, which is the application of the blood, that is La'acharav, that's written after the word Etzba, Velo Avilokach Dechsiv Lakame, but not on the word Velokach, which is the receiving of the blood, that's written before. That's what Rabbi Shimon holds, and therefore there's no requirement of the right hand when it comes to Velokach, when it comes to the Kabbalas Hadam. V'Rabbanan Savri, and the Rabbanan hold Mikra Nidrash Lafanav Uli Acharav, that the pasuk is darshan before and after, and therefore it has to be the right hand both by the Kabbalas Hadam and also by the application of the blood as well. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Had Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon, the following of Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon, the following opinion of Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Mifka mideavua, Mifka miderabbanan. It's different than from what his father says, from what Rabbi Shimon says, and it's also different than the Rabbanan. He has a unique shita, unique approach as follows. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon says, Kol makom shenemar etzba bekabbalah. Anytime the pasuk says etzba by kabbalah, shina bekabbalah pasuk. So if he does it differently by the Kabbalah, by the receiving of the blood, it's disqualified. But benesina kosher, but by the application of the blood, it is kosher. V'chol makom shenemar etzba benesina, and if it says etzba by nesina, so then shina benesina pasul. So then if he changes when it comes to the application of the blood, it's disqualified. Bekabbalah kosher, but when it comes to the receiving of the blood, it will be kosher. And Rashi explains, Mifka midiavua mutzeis michlal divrei aviv umichlal divrei chachamim. It's different than what his father said, and it's also different from what the Chachamim said. And again, he says as follows: Kol makom shenemar etzba by Kabbalah. If it says etzba by Kabbalah, v'lo b'nesina, meaning if it says the word etzba by Kabbalah and not nesina, and Rashi explains, Kagon hai krodel el. It's like that same pasuk we brought earlier. The Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon dorish etzba avilokach dahainu lefanav. What Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon is saying is that the word etzba goes specifically on the word in front of it, which is velokach, v'lo avinasan, and it's not going on the word after. It's not going on v'nasan. That's how he understands that pasuk, and already you see that's exactly the opposite of what Rabbi Shimon said. Rabbi Shimon says it's nidrash liacharav v'lo lefanav. He says no, it's nidrash lefanav v'lo liacharav. And so therefore he says in such a situation, if the word etzba is going lefanav, it's going on the Kabbalah, so then shina beKabbalah, if he does it differently by the Kabbalah, meaning shekivel besmol, if he receives the blood with his left, so then it's going to be problematic. But you have to apply it to where it's written, to the context it's written in, and not to where it is not written. That's the idea of Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon. And again, it's different than Rabbi Shimon because essentially he says it's nidrash lefanav, unlike Rabbi Shimon who says it's nidrash liacharav. And again, the Rabbanan say it's nidrash both lefanav and liacharav. And the Gemara continues, V'hechon and nemar etzba b'nesina. Now, where do we have an example where etzba is said by the nesina, by the application of the blood? Like Rashi just said, the pasuk we dealt with on the previous Amud, so there etzba is written by the Kabbalah. Where do we find that etzba is written by the nesina? T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, V'lakachta midam hapar, v'nasata al karnos hamizbeach be'etzboecha. It says v'nasata, that refers to the application of the blood, and the word be'etzboecha there is going on v'nasata. Because Sovereign Rebbe Elazar Rabbi Shimon holds mikra nidrash lafanav, that the pasuk is explained on what is right before it, meaning the word be'etzboecha, what comes right before be'etzboecha, is v'nasata, v'lo lifnei fanav u'liachra, but it's not going on what's before, meaning to say, it says v'lakachta even earlier than v'nasata, so it's not going on that, and again, it's not going on liachra as well, it's not going on what is written after. And Rashi explains, "V'lakachta midam hapar," you'll take from the blood of the par of the bull. Bepar hamiluim ksiv. This is written specifically by the bull of the days of the miluim. V'lo lifnei panav, and not what's going before. What's before? D'lo darish l'hai be'etzba de miluim avolakachta. You're not going to say that the be'etzba is going on v'lakachta, which is even before v'nasata. V'lo liacharav. You're not going to say it's going on what follows. D'lo darish l'hai be'etzbo dechatas yachid avinosan. Meaning by the word be'etzbo, by the chatas of an individual, you're not going to put that etzbo on v'nasan, which is after. V'hainu polagad diavua. That's in that way. Again, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon is arguing with his father, Rabbi Shimon. Diavua savar liacharav v'lo lefanav. His father holds that it goes on what's after and not what's before. V'yad Rabbanon, he's also arguing on the Rabbanon, the inu savri bein lefanav bein lacharav, because they hold it's going on what's before and on what is after. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol mokom shenemar etzba ukahuna. Anytime it says etzba and it also says kahuna, eina elo yamin. That's a reference to the right. You have to use the right hand. Rashi explains, ukahuna kagon hakohen. For example, the pasuk says the kohen, o hakohanim, or it says the kohanim. Again, if it says etzba and kahuna, that's a reference to the right. The Gemara continues, kasalka diet, and initially we think, what does this mean? That tarti bo'inan, it means we actually need both words to indicate that it has to be the right hand. Kirichsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, v'lokach hakohen midam hachatos be'etzbo. It says in this pasuk the word hakohen, and it also says he takes from the dam hachatos be'etzbo. It says the word etzba as well. V'yolef mitzorah, we learned that out from Mitzorah, where it also uses both terms. The Chsiv, it's written by Mitzorah, v'taval hakohen etzba'o hayimonis. It says again etzba'o hayimonis. Here it's clear that it's the right, and it also uses the word hakohen, so you need to have both words, and then it's an indication of yamin, then it's an indication of the right. And Rashi explains, Tarti bo'inan, you need both etzba ukahuna, you need both the word etzba and kahuna. Kagon hai kro dechsiv gabe zrikas chatos, like the pasuk by the zrika of the blood by the chatos. It says v'lokach hakohen midam hachatos betzbo. It says the word hakohen, it says betzbo. V'kamer Rabbi Yochanan is saying dehacha yamin boy degamer mi mitzora ashir dechsiv bei etzbo kahuna. Rabbi Yochanan is saying that you need to it needs to be with the right. We learned that out from the mitzora. That's the offering of the wealthy mitzora, where it says etzba ukahuna. It says the word etzba and kahuna, umefarish be'yamanis, and there it's clear that it means the right, so it means the right over here as well. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'harei kamitza, but what about the kamitza, which is the fistful by the karva mincha? The loch siv ba ela kahuna, there it only says the word kahuna. Utnana, we learned in the Mishnah Meseches Menachos, kamatz bismol, possible that if the Kohen does the kamitza with the left, it is possible. So there is a requirement of the right, even though over there it just says kahuna. And so the Gemara continues, Elo amar Rava, rather Rava says, O etzba, O kahuna. It means to say either the word etzba or the word kahuna, that will indicate the right. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Abai, Abai said to him, Hare holeches evarim lakevesh, what about bringing the evarim, bringing the limbs to the mizbeach, to the ramp of the mizbeach? Tichsiv behu kahuna, over there it is written kahuna, and again we're saying kahuna alone makes it a requirement that it be the right. Tichsiv, as it's written over there, v'hikrav hakohen asakol v'hiktir hamizbecha, the kohen brings everything to burn on the mizbeach. V'yomar mar, and the master said, Zu holeches evarim lakevesh, this refers to bringing the limbs to the ramp, to the mizbeach. Utanan, and we learned in the Mishnah, Hareg shel yamin bismolo, that he brings the regel shel yamin, the right foot is brought with his left hand. You see, he's using the left. Uveis ora lechutz, and the hide is turned towards the outside. And so here you have an example of a situation where it just says kahuna, and apparently it does mean, and apparently in such a situation, it is not required that it be the right. Even the left is going to be okay. And the Gemara continues and answers, Ki amrinon O etzba o kahuna bedavar hama'akev kapara dumya demitzora. When we say that if it says either etzba or kahuna that there's a requirement of the right, that's only by something that's required for the kapara, for the atonement, similar to what we found again in the pasuk by mitzora, where it was something that was ma'akev, the kapara was a requirement for the atonement. And so therefore in this situation, when it comes to holeches evarim lakevish, which is not a requirement for the atonement, so there kahuna alone is not going to create a requirement that it be with the right hand. But the Gemara continues and says, V'arei Kabbalah, but what about the receiving of the blood? The Chasabahu Kahuna, there it does say Kahuna. V'davar hama'akev bekaparu, and it is something that's required for the atonement. Utznan, but yet we learned in the Mishnah, Kibel Bismol Pasul, according to the Tana Kama, receiving with the left hand as Pasul is disqualified. But for Rabbi Shimon Machshir, Rabbi Shimon says kosher. Why is Rabbi Shimon saying kosher? Again, this is something that's required for the kapara. It says Kahuna. There should be a requirement of the right hand. And the Gemara says to that, well, Rabbi Shimon Tarti boy, Rabbi Shimon Shimon he actually does require both. He requires kahuna and he requires that it says etzba, and so therefore, again, according to Rabbi Shimon, he's going to say that the left hand is going to be kosher. But the Gemara says, "Mi boy, Rabbi Shimon Tarti." Does Rabbi Shimon really require both? Does he require etzba and kahuna? V'atanya, but we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Shimon says, "Kol makom shenemar yad." Anytime it says yad, eino el yamin, it means the right. Etzba, if it says finger, eino el yamin, it means the right. And so therefore, apparently, you don't need the word kahuna. And the Gemara answers to that, you're right. Etzba lo by kahuna. The word etzba does not require kahuna, meaning etzba alone indicates the right, according to Rabbi Shimon, but kahuna by etzba. But the word kahuna does require the word etzba. But the Gemara says, if that's the case, vela kohen lamali, what do you even need the word kohen for? Because etzba alone indicates the right. And the Gemara says to that, bichihunan, and that actually is really there to teach you something else. It is that they have to serve bichihunan, meaning as kohanim, they have to be wearing the garments of the kahuna. And Rashi explains, Haregel shal yamin, the right leg of the animal, nosei biyad smol, that he carries in his left hand lakevish to the ramp, mishum the regel yamin karva tchila, because the right foot, that's brought first, im harosh, together with the head. Kedekaimalim beparak beis de yuma, that's what we say in the second parak of Yuma, beparak beis de seder Yuma, in the second parak of Meseches Yuma, v'hilkach, and therefore molech harosh biyamin shu chashiv, the rosh, the head, which is more important, he carries in the right hand, v'haregel besmol, and then the leg, he carries in the left. That's what it says over there again. That is a Mishnah in Meseches Talmud. Uveis ora lechutz, and the Mishnah in Talmud says beis ora, which is the hide, the skin is pointing towards the outside. Klape ha'am, that's visible, that's towards the people, so to speak. Umakam hachetach klape hamolech, in the area that's cut, that's toward the person who's walking it over. Tahachi shaper, that's better that way. Shlo yira hachetach, that you shouldn't see the area where it is cut. In any case, over here you see that the left hand is acceptable. And the Gemara then said, Hama'akiv kapara dum, it's only required to be the right if it's something that's ma'akiv kapara, something which is a requirement for the atonement. Dumya dehazah shal mitzorah, similar to the sprinkling of the mitzorah, which is required. Could go in kmitza, for example. Kmitza, that's a requirement. Aval holeches evarim, but when it comes to the walking over, the conveying of the limbs, to lo ma'akva kapara, that is not required for the atonement. Du atzma shalo huktaru emurim kasher, because even if you didn't burn the emurim, even if you didn't burn the sacrificial portions, it would still be kosher. So there, lo bo yamin. So there, yamin, their right is not necessary. And the Gemara continues, and said, Kabbalah kasav b'kahuna. What about by Kabbalah, which is something that's required for the atonement, for the kapara? So there it says kahuna. T'chsiv ikrivu b'nei Aaron hakohanim. It says the b'nei Aaron hakohanim. It says the word kohanim. V'yamar marzu Kabbalah sadam. And the master said that refers to the receiving of the blood. And so then the question is that Rabbi Shimon said that when it comes to the Kabbalah, that it's kosher, that it's able to be done with the left, to which the Gemara said, Rabbi Shimon really tarti boy, he requires both kahuna and etzba. Again, ultimately the Gemara would say that really etzba alone. And the Gemara then asked, V'ela kohen lamali, well, if that's the case, what do we need kohen for if etzba alone signifies that it's the right hand? Meaning kohen lamali b'kabbalah, why do we need the word kohen by the receiving? Haksiv b'nei Aaron, it says b'nei Aaron, ilav la'agmurei minasa. The reason why it says it must be to teach the right, meaning it says b'nei Aaron, so it doesn't need to say anything about kohen. So isn't that teaching the right? But yet we don't need it for the right. And the answer to that was bikihuno. It teaches that they have to be bikihuno, meaning it has to be done bibigdei kahuna, with the garments of the kahuna. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'harei Rika, what about by the throwing of the blood? Delo chasa behu ela kahuna. There it only says kahuna. It does not say etzba as well. Utanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Zarak b'small pasul. It says that if he throws with his left hand, it is pasul, it is disqualified. The right hand is a requirement, apparently with just the word kahuna. V'lo polig Rabbi Shimon, we don't find that Rabbi Shimon argues over there. He seems to agree that Zarak b'small is pasul. And again, we just said that Rabbi Shimon requires that it says etzba, that kahuna alone is not enough to make a requirement for the right hand. And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Abaya says, Polig bebraisa. Rabbi Shimon actually does argue. He argues in the braisa. Titania, as we learned in the braisa, Kibel b'small pasul, if he receives with the left hand, it's disqualified for Rabbi Shimon machshir, and Rabbi Shimon says it's kosher. Zorak b'small pasul, also if he throws with the left hand, it is pasul for Rabbi Shimon machshir, and Rabbi Shimon says kosher. You see that Rabbi Shimon argues by zrika as well. And Rashi explains, Zarak b'smol pasol Rabbi Shimon machshir, he throws with the left, it is disqualified, but Rabbi Shimon says kosher. Rashi notes, ashar kol hazvachim, this is going on other karbonos, the lo chasa b'hu etzba, where it doesn't say the word etzba, meaning to say by the carbon chatas, it says the word etzba as we have mentioned. This is going by other karbonos, where it doesn't say etzba, ela vizarko hakohanim, it says vizarko hakohanim, they're throwing the blood. Aval bezrikas chatas, now when it comes to the zrikas chatas, which is an application of the blood with the finger, Moder Rabbi Shimon, there Rabbi Shimon would admit, Keda Amar La'el, like he said earlier, Be'etzbo v'nasan, we said in the previous Amar, it says Be'etzbo v'nasan, he does the application with his finger, Shalot Tahei Nesina Elabiyamin, that the Nesina should be done with the right. So again, we're talking here by other karbonos, and again, the point over here is that Rabbi Shimon, indeed, he does argue by Zrika as well. He says that Zarak B'smol is going to be kosher. And the Gemara continues, Elohadiyam Rava, but what about that which Rava said, Yad Yad L'kmitza, Regel Regel L'chalitza, Ozen Ozen L'ritzia. We'll see Rashi in a moment, but he learns out from the word Yad by Kmitza, from the word Regel by Chalitza, and from the word Ozen by Ritzia. Rashi here explains, V'Elohadiyam Rava b'menachos b'perakama Yad Yad L'kmitza. This is Beparshas Mitzora, Asher, and the Parsha of a Mitzora who's a wealthy Mitzora. So it's written, Al Tanuch Ozen Hayemonis v'Albo and Yado Hayemonis v'Albo and Raglo Hayemonis. It talks about the right, and it says Ozen Hayemonis, the right ear. It says Bohen Yado Hayemonis, which is the right thumb. Bohen Raglo Hayemonis, that's the right big toe. Ukra Yiserahu K'dim Mefarish Asim. This is all an extra pasuk. That's all explained over there. The Ka'amar Rava, and Rava says Yad de Mitzora, that when it says the word Yad by Mitzora, Asi l'gzera shava lemigmar Yad de Kmitza mina. So we use that for gzera shava, that the Yad by Kmitza, by the fistful, shetahei biyamin. We learn out that should be with the right. Vehecha kasav Yad be Kmitza. Where does it say Yad by Kmitza? Vayimole kapo mimena. It says in the pasuk Vayimole kapo mimena. And so in any case, the point over here is that we're learning from Mitzora this idea that it is the right hand. So lamali. So why is that necessary? Midarabba bar Chana nafka. Shouldn't it already be learned out from Rava bar Chana? And Rashi explains, Rava bar Chana nafka deha kahuna ksiv, because again, what did Rava bar Chana say above? He said that if it says the word kahuna, so then that is enough to signify that it needs to be the right. So what do you need this gezerah shaveh for? And the Gemara continues and answers, Chad lekometz v'chad lekiddush kometz. You do need both limudim, you need both sources for the idea that it's the right, because one is for the fistful and one is for the sanctification of the kometz, the sanctification of the fistful. That's why we need two different sources. Rashi says, lekiddush kometz b'chli shares. When you're sanctifying the kometz in the kli shares, sheyehei biyamin, it has to be with the right. Sheyochas hakli shel mekadesh bo biyado hayamanis. He has to hold the kli which he's using to consecrate it, which he's using to sanctify it. He has to hold that in his right hand, and so therefore you need both the source of Rava bar Chana. Again, that's the source of Rava bar Chana above, that Rava bar Chana said that if it says etzba ukahuna eina ela yamin, and so therefore that is one source for the right, and then you also need the source again from the Gzera Shaveh, because you need it for kometz and kiddush kometz, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chaf Hey Amud Aleph.